Parikrama book. So it is on chapter 87 in Krishna book. We have read one paragraph of the day, so we will read from there. The purpose of King Parikshit inquiry was to ascertain from Sukadev Goswami whether the Vedas ultimately describe the absolute truth as impersonal or as personal. Understanding of the absolute truth progresses in three features: impersonal Brahman, Paramatma, localized in everyone's heart, and at last, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. The Vedas deal with three departments of activities. One is called Karma Kanda, or activities under the Vedic injunction, which gradually purify one to understand his real position. The next is Jnana Kanda, the process of understanding the absolute truth by speculative methods. And the third is Upasana Kanda, or worship of the Supreme Personality Godhead, and sometimes of the demigod also. The worship of the demigod recommended in the Veda is ordered with the understanding of the demigod's relationship to the personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has many part and parcels. Some are called swamsas, or his personal expansions, and some are called vibhinamsas, or the living entities. All such expansions, both swamsas and vibhinamsas, are emanations from the original personality of Godhead. Swamsa expansion are called Vishnu Tattva, whereas the Vibhinamsa expansion are called Jiva Tattva. The different demigods are Jiva Tattva. The conditioned souls are generally put into the activities of the material world for sense gratification. Therefore, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, to regulate those who are very much addicted to different kind of sense gratification, the worship of demigod is sometimes recommended. For example, for person very much addicted to meat eating, the Vedic injunctions recommend that after worshipping the form of the goddess Kali and sacrificing a goat, not any other animal, under Karma Kanda regulation, the worshipper may be allowed to eat meat. The idea is not to encourage one to eat meat, but to allow one who insists on eating meat to eat it under certain restricted conditions. Therefore, worship of the demigod is not worship of the absolute truth. But by worshipping the demigods, one may gradually comes to accept the Supreme Personality Godhead in an indirect way. This indirect acceptance is described in the Bhagavad Gita as avadhi. Avadhi means not bona fide. Since demigod worship is not bona fide, the impersonalists stress concentration on the impersonal future of the absolute truth. King Parikshit's question was, which is the ultimate target of Vedic knowledge? This concentration on the impersonal future of the absolute truth, or concentration on the personal future? After all, both the impersonal and the personal future of the Supreme Lord are beyond our material conceptions. The impersonal future of the Absolute, the Brahman effulgence, is but the rays of the personal body of Krishna. These rays of the personal body of Krishna are cast all over the creation of the Lord, and the portion of the effulgence which is covered by the material cloud is called the created cosmos of the three material qualities, sattva, rajas, and tamas. How can person who are within this clouded portion called the material world conceive of the absolute truth by speculative method? In answering King Parikshit's question, Sukadeva Goswami replied that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has created the mind, senses, and living force of the living entity for the purpose of sense gratification and transmigration from one kind of body to another, as well as for the purpose of allowing liberation from the material conditions. In other words, one can utilize the senses, mind, and living force for sense gratification and transmigration from one body to another, or for the matter of liberation. The Vedic injunctions are there just to give the conditioned soul the chance for sense gratification under regulative principles, and thereby also to give them the chance for promotion to higher conditions of life. Ultimately, if the consciousness is purified, one comes to his original position and goes back home, back to Godhead. The living entity is intelligent. One therefore has to utilize his intelligence over the mind and the senses. When the mind and senses are purified by the proper use of intelligence, then the conditioned soul is liberated. Otherwise, if the intelligence is not properly utilized in controlling the senses and the mind, the conditioned soul continues to transmigrate from one kind of body to another simply for sense gratification. Another point clearly stated in the answer of Sukadeva Goswami is that it is the mind, senses, and intelligence of the individual living entity that the Lord created. It is not stated that the living entity themselves were ever created, just as the shining particle of the sun rays always exist with the sun. The living entities exist eternally as part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But just as the sun rays are sometimes covered by a cloud, which is created by the sun, so the conditioned souls, although eternally existing as part of the Supreme Lord, are sometimes put within the cloud of the material concept of life in the darkness of ignorance. The whole Vedic process is to elevate the darkened condition. Ultimately, when the senses and mind of the conditioned being are fully purified, he comes to his original position called Krishna consciousness, and that is liberation. In the Vedanta Sutra, the first sutra or the code question about the absolute truth, Athato Brahma Jignasa. What is the nature of the absolute truth? The next sutra answers that the nature of the absolute truth is that he is the origin of everything. Whatever we experience, even in this material condition of life, is but an emanation from him. The absolute truth created the mind, senses, and intelligence. This means that the absolute truth is not without mind, intelligence, and senses. In other words, he is not impersonal. The very word created means that he has transcendental intelligence. For example, when a father begets a child, the child has senses because the father also has the senses. The child is born with hands and legs because the father also has the hand and legs. Sometimes it is said that the man is made after the image of God. The absolute truth is therefore the supreme personality with transcendental mind, senses, and intelligence. When one's mind, intelligence, and senses are purified of material contamination, one can understand the original future of the absolute truth as a person. The Vedic process is to promote the conditioned soul gradually from the mode of ignorance to the mode of passion, and from the mode of passion to the mode of goodness. In the mode of goodness, there is sufficient light for understanding things as they are. For example, from earth a tree grows, and from the wood of the tree fire is ignited. In that igniting process, we first of all find smoke, and the next stage is heat, and then fire. When there is actually fire, we can utilize for various purposes. Therefore, fire is the ultimate goal. Similarly, in the gross material stage of life, the quality of ignorance is very prominent. Dissipation of this ignorance takes place in the gradual progress of civilization from the barbarian stage to civilized life. And when one comes to the stage of civilized life, he is said to be in the mode of passion, in the barbarian stage, or in the mode of ignorance. The senses are gratified in a very crude way, whereas in a mode of passion or in civilized life, the senses are gratified in a polished manner. But when one is promoted to the mode of goodness, one can understand that the senses and the mind are engaged in material activities only due to being covered by perverted consciousness. When this perverted consciousness is gradually transformed into Krishna consciousness, then the path of liberation is open. So it is not that one is unable to approach the absolute truth by the senses and the mind. The conclusion is rather that the senses, mind, and intelligence in the gross stage of contamination cannot appreciate the nature of the absolute truth. But when purified, the senses, mind, and intelligence then can understand what the absolute truth is. The purifying process is called devotional service or Krishna consciousness. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is clearly stated that the purpose of Vedic knowledge is to understand Krishna, and that Krishna is understood by devotional service, beginning with the process of surrender. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, one has to think of Krishna always. One has to render loving service to Krishna always. And one always has to worship and bow down before Krishna. By this process only, one can enter into the kingdom of God without any doubt. So one who is enlightened in the mode of goodness by the process of devotional service is freed from the modes of ignorance and passion. In answering King Parikshit's question, Shukadev Goswami used the word Atmane, which indicate the stage of Brahminical qualification in which one is allowed to study the Vedic literatures, known as Upanishads. The Upanishad described in different ways the transcendental qualities of the Supreme Lord, the Absolute Truth. The Supreme Lord is called Nirguna. That does not mean he has no qualities. It is only because he has qualities that the conditioned living entity can have the qualities. The purpose of studying the Upanishad is to understand the transcendental qualities of the Absolute Truth, as opposed to the material qualities of ignorance, passion, and goodness. That is the way of Vedic understanding. Great sages like the four Kumaras, headed by Sanaka, followed this principle of Vedic knowledge and came gradually from impersonal understanding to the platform of personal worship of the Supreme Lord. It is therefore recommended that we must follow the great personalities. Sukadev Goswami is also one of the great personalities, and his answer to the inquiry of Maharaj Pariksit is authorized. One who follows in the footsteps of such great personalities surely will walk very easily on the path of liberation and ultimately goes back home, back to Godhead. That is the way of perfecting this human form of life. Wonderful message. Sukadev Goswami continued to speak to Parikshit Maharaj. My dear king, he said, in this regard I shall narrate a nice story. This story is important because it is in connection with Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This narration is a conversation between Narayana Rishi and the great sage Narad. Narayana Rishi still resides in Badrikashram and is accepted as an incarnation of Narayan. Badrikashram is situated in the northernmost part of the Himalayan mountains and is always covered with snow. Religious Indians still go to visit this place during the summer season when the snowfall is not very severe. So the story goes like once when Narad Muni, the great devotee and ascetic among the demigods, was traveling among different planets. He desired to meet the ascetic Narayana personally in Badrikashram and offer him respect. This great sage incarnation of Godhead, Narayan Rishi, has been undergoing great penances and austerities from the very beginning of the creation to teach the inhabitants of Bharatvarsh how to attain the highest perfectional stage of going back to Godhead. His austerities and penances are exemplary practices for the human being. The incarnation of God Narayan Rishi was sitting among many devotees in the village known as Kalapagran. Of course, these were not ordinary sages sitting with him. And the great sage Narad also appeared there. After offering his respect to Narayan Rishi, Narad Muni asked him exactly the same question King Parikshit asked Sukadev Goswami. Then the Rishi answered by following in the footsteps of his predecessors. He narrated a story of how the same question has been discussed on the planet known as Janaloka, which is above the Swargaloka planet, such as the moon and Venus. On this planet, great sages and saintly persons live, and they once discussed the same point regarding understanding of Brahman and his real identity. The great sage Narayan began to speak to Narad Muni as follows. My dear Narad, he said, I shall tell you a story which took place long, long ago. There was a great meeting of the denizens of the heavenly planets, and almost all the important brahmacharis, such as the four Kumaras, Sananandana, Sanaka, Sanatana, and Sanat Kumar, attended. Their discussion was on the subject matter of understanding the absolute truth, Brahman. You were not present at that meeting because you had gone to see my expansion, Aniruddha, who lives on the island of Swetip. In this meeting, all the great sages and brahmacharis very elaborately discussed the point about which you have asked me. And their discussion was very interesting. It was so delicate that even the Vedas were unable to answer the intricate questions raised there. So Narayan Rishi told Naradji that the same question Naradji had raised has been discussed in that meeting on Janaloka. That is the way of understanding through the parampara or disciplic succession. Maharaj Pariksit questioned Sukadev Goswami, and Sukadev Goswami referred the matter to Narad Muni, who had in the same way questioned Narayan Rishi, who had put the matter to still higher authorities on the planet of Janaloka, where it was discussed among the great Kumaras, Sanatana, Sanaka, Sanandana, and Sanat Kumar. These four brahmacharis, the Kumaras, are recognized scholars in the Vedas and other Shastras. Their unlimited volumes of knowledge, backed by the austerity and penances, are exhibited by their sublime ideal character. They are very amiable and gentle in behavior, and for them there is no distinction between friends, well wishers, and enemies. Being transcendentally situated, such personality as the Kumaras are above all material considerations and are always neutral in respect to material dualities. In the discussion held among the four brothers, one of them, namely Sanandana, was selected to speak, and the other brothers became the audience to hear him. So Sanandana said, after the dissolutions of the whole cosmic manifestation, the entire energy and the whole creation in its nucleus form enter into the body of Garbhodakshay Vishnu. The Lord at that time remains asleep for a long, long time. And when there is again necessity of creation, the Vedas personified assemble around the Lord and begin to glorify him, describing his wonderful transcendental pastimes, exactly like servant of a king. When the king is asleep in the morning, the appointed reciter come around his bedroom and begin to sing of his wonderful activities. And while hearing of his glorious activities, the king gradually awakens. So the Vedic reciters or the personified Vedas sing thus, O unconquerable Lord, you are the Supreme Personality. No one is equal to you or greater than you. No one can be more glorious in his activities. All glories unto you, all glories unto you. By your own transcendental nature, you fully possess all six opulences. As such, you are able to deliver all conditioned soul from the clutches of Maya. O Lord, we fervently pray that you kindly do so. All the living entities, being your part and parcel, are naturally joyful, eternal, and full of knowledge. But due to their own faults, they imitate you by trying to become the supreme enjoyer. Thus, they disobey your supremacy and become offenders. And because of their offenses, your material energy has taken charge of them. Thus, the transcendental qualities of joyfulness, bliss, and wisdom have been covered by the clouds of the three material qualities. This cosmic manifestation made of the three material qualities is just like a prison house for the conditioned souls. The conditioned souls are struggling very hard to escape from material bondage, and according to the different conditions of life, they have been given different types of engagement. But since all engagement are based on knowledge supplied by you, the conditioned soul can execute pious activities only when you mercifully inspire them to do so. Therefore, without taking shelter of your lotus feet, one cannot surpass the influence of the material energy. Actually, we, as personified Vedic knowledge, are always engaged in your service by helping the conditioned souls understand you. So, these prayer of the Vedas personified illustrate that the Vedas are meant for helping the conditioned souls to understand Krishna. All the Shrutis or personified Vedas offer glories to the Lord again and again, singing Jai Jai. These indicate that the Lord is the most glorious of all his glories. The most important is his causeless mercy upon the conditioned soul in reclaiming them from the clutches of Maya. So still we have some time. Let's see. There are unlimited number of living entities in different varieties of bodies, some moving and some standing in one place. And the conditioned life of these living entities is due only to their forgetfulness of their eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When the living entity wants to lord it over the material energy by imitating the position of Krishna, he is immediately captured by the material energy, and according to his desire, he is offered one variety of the 8.4 million different kinds of bodies. Although undergoing the threefold miseries of material existence, the illusion living entity falsely think himself the master of all his service. Under the spell of the material energy, represented by the threefold material qualities, the living entity is so entangled that he is not at all able to become free unless he is grasped by the Supreme Lord. The living entity cannot conquer the influence of the material modes of nature by his own endeavor. But because material nature is working under the control of the Supreme Lord, the Lord is beyond its jurisdictions. Except for him, all living entities from Brahma down to the ant are conquered by the contact of material nature. That's a long chapter, huh? Because the Lord possesses in full the sick opulence of wealth, strength, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. He alone is beyond the spell of material nature. Unless the living entity is situated in Krishna consciousness, he cannot approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yet the Lord, by his omnipotency, can detect from within as the supersoul how a living entity can gradually come to him even while performing his ordinary work. As the Lord advises in the Bhagavad Gita, whatever you do it for me. Whatever you eat, first offer it to me. Whatever charity you want to give, first give it to me. And whatever austerities and penances you want to perform there for me. In this way, The karmis are directed gradually to develop Krishna consciousness. Similarly, Krishna directs the philosopher to approach him gradually by discriminating between Brahman and Maya. For at last, when one is mature in knowledge, he surrenders unto Krishna. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, after many, many births, the wise philosopher surrendered unto me. The yogis are also directed to concentrate their meditation upon Krishna within the heart. And by such a continuous process of Krishna consciousness, they can also become free from the clutches of the material energy. The devotees, however, are engaged in the devotional service with love and affection from the very beginning, and therefore the Lord personally directs them so that they can approach Him without any difficulty or deviation. This is stated in the Bhagavad Gita. Only by the grace of the Lord can one living entity understand the exact position of Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagwan. So the next paragraph is really long. I think I will just write a note because this is the electronic version. It's very difficult to remember where we left. So let me write down the next sentence. Okay, so with those thoughts, I would like to offer my humble obeisances at the desk of these wonderful Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis who join every morning taking austerity to chant the holy name together to make our day successful and ultimately our life successful. So let me offer my humble obeisances at the desk of these wonderful devotees. Vanchakalpatarubhasya kripa sindhu bhaivacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaisnavebhyo namo namaha. Thank you very much. And if Krishna so desire, we will see you tomorrow morning at 2 o'clock Central Standard Time. Thank you. Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Hari Bol, Prabhuji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. It's raining very much in Gujarat. Everything is standstill. Yeah, since I came.
Very nice.
Yeah. So dear Krishna, Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Thank you,
So
Prabhuji.
we had a wonderful celebration. I saw